Now for today's program. Eleanor Reissa is a Tony-nominated director, Broadway and television actress, and a prize-winning playwright. She has been a headliner in every major musical venue in New York City and in festivals around the world. Eleanor is a storyteller in both English and Yiddish, and she is the daughter of parents who lived through the Holocaust. Currently, she is the host of Yale University's podcast, Those Who Were There, Voices from the Holocaust. Eleanor's book, The Letters Project, A Daughter's Journey, was recently released. Yehuda Hyman is a playwright, dancer, actor, and choreographer, and his work has been produced at theaters throughout the country. He is the artistic director of Mystical Feet Company and teaches acting for Devised Theater at Manhattan School of Music. Yehuda's many honors include the Kennedy Center New American Plays Award. His essay, 3 Hasidic Dances, was first published in the book Seeing Israeli and Jewish Dance. His recent article, Dancing on Smoke, about his dance activism in Germany, was published in the Oxford Handbook of Jewishness and Dance. Please welcome Eleanor Reissa and Yehuda Hyman.
Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Yehuda. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. I just want to tell our audience and those listening that Eleanor and I have known each other for many, many years. We've been colleagues in the theater and good friends. We've laughed together, we've cried together. And I've admired Eleanor as an actress, as a director, as a playwright, and now this memoir, which moves me so deeply. And that's why I'm honored to be here today. This memoir is shattering, but it's also, well, first of all, it reads like a mystery. It's a page turner, but it's also just full of Eleanor's voice, which is hilarious and full of life. So even though there's so much, well, you know, it's Yom HaShoah, you know what it is, but it's about life.
The name of the book, Yehuda.
Oh yeah, the name, The Letters Project, A Daughter's Journey, that book. Yeah, so let's start, shall we?
Okie doke.
Okay, so the book is called The Letters Project, A Daughter's Journey, and it's about a project, but your book starts with a short discussion about another project that you did as a child, a science project, and that becomes a metaphor for your journey throughout this book. Can you tell us a little bit about the science project?
Sure. You know, the whole book, as you know, but the book was going to be a play, right? The book was going to be a 3-character play, a him for my father, a her for my mother, and a me as everybody else. And what happened during this journey of this story was larger than I imagined. But it reminded me of something from when I was a child. It was such a large project, this book, but it reminded me when I was a kid, I had to do a science project in the 4th grade. And I'm not good at science because I'm not from the research people. I'm not from the fact people. I'm like an impressionist-ish kind of person. But I had been to the Museum of Natural History, and the dinosaur bones really moved me, and how they were able to piece together all these bones, all this ancient life, and turn it into something that we could look at now and imagine. And so I decided to use chicken bones, because my grandfather was a kosher butcher, to make a dinosaur or a chicken. I didn't know. And that's it wound up being an enormous project, and one that I ultimately did not achieve success. I mean, I wound up attaching wires to a buzzer and a battery like everybody else in public school. But it turned out, really, Yehuda, I didn't know it was going to be a metaphor. It was how I wanted to start the book, but it did seem to thread its way all by itself through the story.
And I love the way it starts, because it's so you, and it's funny, and yeah. So I'd like to get started. There's so much to talk about, and you promised to read us some passages from your book, which I'm excited about. Can you tell us about your two parents and what you knew of them growing up, and what that was like in Brooklyn, and having these two parents, Ruth and Cheskel?
Cheskel, yes.
Yeah.
My parents, I mean, I'll just kind of give you as quick a thing about them as possible. I didn't know much about them. My father was 50 when I was born. My mother was 30. So there was a 20-year spread between them. They were second cousins or first cousins once removed. Somebody will tell me someday what the difference is. They were both born in Poland, my father in 1901 and my mother in 1922. I'm going to tell you what I knew before I did this journey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I learned so much after this journey, during this journey. So my parents came in 1949 to America. My father lived through Auschwitz. I knew my father had another family. I knew, not until I was 14, I didn't know. When I was 14, I learned that he had been married before. I learned that I had a half brother, Harry, who was on the kinder transport and living in England. I didn't know that until I was 14. And my mother also had a family, a husband who abandoned her, and a young son who I lived with and thought was my brother. I didn't know he was my half brother until I learned about my English brother from the kinder transport and learned he was a half brother. My parents married in 51. They divorced they separated like in 58. They divorced in 61 or 2. They both were sweatshop workers. My mother in ILGWU, the Ladies Garment Workers Union sweatshop, and my father in a paintbrush factory sweatshop. In 1970, when I was a freshman in college, my father had a bunch of strokes that I was his caretaker at the age of whatever that was, late teens, early 20s, late teens. And I put him in a nursing home because I didn't know what else to do. And he remained there alone until he died in 1976. In 1976, just as my mother said something to me like, "I hope what happened to your father never happens to me," she got multiple myeloma and was sick and died at the age in 1986. And so I lived with my mother all of my days until I got my own apartment when I was like 16 and a half, 17. I was in a hurry.
Yeah.
I was in a hurry. I was in a hurry to flee them, and I was in a hurry for my own life. And, you know, it was the 70s, and I wanted to be free. And I saw my father only on Sundays. And it was a fairly obligatory type of visit. I mean, I loved him and stuff, but that was what it was until he had those strokes. And when he did, I was at the nursing home every day for the first 2 years because I thought he was going to die in a minute.
And this is when you're how old?
17, 18,
Yeah.
19.
That's a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And I thought I knew everything, of course, at that time, and I knew very little. And I thought, I mean, my mother was neither of them remarried. Both of them had lives that, in Yiddish, there's an expression, auf meine Sonnem gesucht, such a life you wish on an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And theirs was such a life. which is not to say they weren't joyful and they didn't have joy, but they had a hard, hard, hard life.
Where do you
And
think you get your sense of humor from? Your father, your mother, or both? Or
my grandmother, my mother's mother, I lived with them in the summers in the Catskills in a bungalow, and she was funny, even though, I mean, she lived through the Holocaust as well in Uzbekistan, which is where my mother and her family were during the war. My grandmother was very funny. She used to, take out her teeth and make us laugh, and she would cheat at cards just so that you could watch her cheat. She would cheat,
Mhm.
and like, so, but I don't know. Frankly, I think my sense of humor comes from seeing the darkness. And I feel like from darkness comes funny. I don't know how to make funny except out of
Yeah,
darkness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Shall we go to where the book really takes off, which is the discovery of the letters? Do you want to go
Sure,
there? Yeah. So
sure.
can you tell us how that happened? And
So when my mother died in 1986, I found these letters in her lingerie drawer uh, that I didn't know existed. There were 56 letters on large, good stock stationery with a business heading that said C.H. Schlisselberg, which was my father's name and mine, and an importer of, in German, eggs, chickens, fruits, and vegetables. And then in the script, it said, with Latin letters, not Hebrew letters, it said Tayere, Ruchale, and Shamale on every letter, which I could read and I understood. And in Yiddish, that means dear Ruchale, which my mother's name was in America was Ruth, but in Yiddish was Ruchel, and the endearing way is Ruchale, and my brother's name was Shaman, and so Shamale. So these two endearing names and these letters that I could not then read another word of, except the salutation on the bottom was always Chaskel Schlisselberg, his full name, my father's. And I had these letters. I showed them to friends. No one knew that they were German. Why would they be German? I didn't translate them until 2018, 30 years later.
wow.
I was doing a play in Decent on Broadway. I had some extra money, and I felt a little bit entitled to do something for myself or my art, because I was somewhat recognized by Pulitzer Prize winner Paula Vogel and Tony winner Rebecca Teichman. And so I felt worthy for a moment, and I proceeded to have the letters translated. And I'm going to fast forward this, Yehuda, a little,
Sure.
okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So I found this woman to translate, a young woman, Yeva Lapsker, who was the girlfriend of Dan Kahn, who is a very well-known Yiddish singer who lives in Berlin. And Yeva, I gave her 10 letters and gave her half the money, because that's how I was raised.
Mhm.
And she went back to Germany, and I had a concert with Frank London, who was and is one of my performing partners, one of my singing partners, musical partners. And we had a gig in Berlin, and I met up with Yeva, and I gave her the money, the rest of the money, and she gave me the letters back. And she said to me over coffee, she said, you know, uh, my brother lives in Stuttgart. We were in Berlin. My
Mhm.
brother lives in Stuttgart. I said, oh, that's nice. She said, yeah, I'm going to visit him in January. This was November. I said, oh, that's nice too. I mean, really? Why do I care about this? I don't know. And then she says, my brother lives around the corner from the address on your father's letters.
Amazing.
And I said, what? She said, yeah, he lives around the corner. And I'm going in January, and if you want to come with me, I will go early, and we can stop in Ulm, which is where the displaced persons camp where my mother went after the war was, which is only an hour from Stuttgart, and we can go to Ulm and Stuttgart. And I thought, what? You know, why would I go? Why would I go there? What am I going to do there? Everybody's dead. There's nothing there. Who's going to pay for it? Of course, I thought that. Is that my money? And yeah. And shortly, and it had never, Yehuda, for a moment, ever occurred to me to go to Ulm or Stuttgart. I thought there was nothing there. And this is what that place, maybe I could read that thing.
That would be great.
Like.
Yeah.
So this is and I'll try to read fast.
You don't have to read fast.
Okay.
Yeah, just read. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. So part of this book, I talk to myself a lot. And a lot of the book is like talking to myself, and you know, after decades of therapy and things like that, I try to speak to myself in a kinder fashion than in the past, which was very harsh and judgmental and mean. Mm-hmm. So this is when I decide that I'm going to go to Germany to let Yeva show me around.
Yeah.
And this is what I write. I try to remind myself of the point of this trip. Why in the world am I going? Another unresearched science project? I stop and think, what are you doing, Eleanor? Here's what I come up with time and time again. My parents have been dead for more than half of my life, more than 35 years. It's a long time to be without parents, without people who know you and know where you come from, and without the unconditional love that only they could give. I miss them. I want to see them, be with them. That's why I'm going. I'm going to be where they were, where they lived, worked, made love, where they walked and wept and starved and froze. Maybe somehow I will see them, meet them there, find clues, even after 65 years, maybe. These letters are my treasure map. The X must mark the spot to somewhere, no? My mother kept these 56 letters written by my father for over 40 years for some damn reason, no? After their divorce, after his death, why? What did they mean? What was in them that was worth saving? And like her, I kept them too. For more than 20 years, untranslated, just lying in their baggie in my sloppy underwear drawer. For what? What should I do with them, with my inheritance? Nothing? No. These letters are a message to me from beyond. From my father who wrote them, and from my mother who kept them, and now from me who will follow them. I tell stories for a living as an actress, writer, singer, director. That's what I've spent my life doing, albeit in my own helter-skelter fashion. My work is an enormous part of who I am, and I am my parents' daughter. So if I don't find out who they were, how the hell will I know who I am? I'm going to pull on this thread for as long as it's got give and see where it takes me. My own DNA strand. I identify and always have as the daughter of Holocaust survivors. That is my gender, my invisible birthmark.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.
So there's so much detail in the story about the process of you translating the letters and then what happened in Germany when you went for those 4 days. But do you want to speak briefly, and feel free to skip over anything? It's interesting that you had to get a couple of translators involved.
I did, because it takes, and I mean, a lot of people say, well, why didn't you translate the letter? What took you so long? And I can answer that
Yeah.
question too, because I didn't know that answer either. I just thought I was lazy or something bad. But it's hard to translate. These letters are in script, right? They're in longhand, and somebody's in German, and um, so, and it's not like I hired Yeva as a full-time job and paid her, the amount of money a translator should be paid to work fast and full-time. So I had to have a few different translators,
And also
each
people translate differently. Oh, you were about to
and
say
each
that.
one had their
Yeah.
own style in a way. But I mean, I was so scattered, and I still am, that some of the letters I had translated twice, unintentionally. So yeah, but the letters kind of they just got me into the door.
Right.
They just got me to the door of a room or the door of a house, and they were the key to opening the door. And then I found myself in a world that I did not expect, and the kindness of strangers um, was enormous. So that trip in Berlin, so Yeva invites me to go with her for 4 days or
Mhm.
so. And at that same trip, I'm with Frank London, and he had mentioned the letters to his friend and manager, Lutz Engelhardt, who I meet. And Lutz says, oh, so interesting about these letters. Tell me about them. And I mentioned Stuttgart and Ulm and this town Ludwigsburg, which I think nothing of. And and Lutz said, Ludwigsburg, Stuttgart. I know people there. I can help you. And if you decide to go to Germany, let me know, and I will connect you to someone. Well, and I decided to go, and he connected me to someone, to a fellow who he really didn't know, who lived in Ludwigsburg, Hans Hardy Huber, and I write to him, and he writes me back and says, listen, I'll help you. Give me the names of your parents, their dates of birth and location, and we'll come up with an itinerary for you. And this stranger sends me an email back a couple of days later, and he said, I found information about your father. There's testimony that he gave to the Ministry of Justice in 1947. And, the letters are 1949. Who knew there's going to I'm going to find something from 1947. My father, so, and there's an archive in Ludwigsburg, and there's information about him in Ludwigsburg. And if you want, are you a fan uh, of Leonard Cohen? He says, because if you are, we could go see a band that does Leonard Cohen cover tunes. And of course I am a fan. And he says, is there anything else you would, well, there's the Transport Memorial in Stuttgart. There's another memorial in Ludwigsburg, and there's the fellow who created these things called, I think it's called Stolpensteine, tripping stones in Ludwigsburg. We'll meet with him. So he created a whole itinerary for me. And then he said to me, is there anything, what about you? What do you want to see? And I, of course, I, from the not research person, from the, what do I feel like? I did say to him, there are some photos of my father and my family that I don't know where they're from. They're not from the war, they're before the war. So if you could connect me to a costume designer from the theater or film, that would be great. And, as we know, Yehuda, costume designers are impeccable. I mean, they know who a person is by their hairstyle, by their clothes, by the cut of their collar, by the fabric that they wear. So I thought I would learn things about my father and mother from, and and don't you know, in the next email, you know, he has an appointment with me for the costume designer at Theater House in in Stuttgart. So, so maybe now is a goodish time to
Photos?
look at a couple of those photos, because
And yeah.
it was so important. So Suzanne, if you're in the mood, so we, so this is an early, this is an early picture. The bearded man and the woman in the wig are my grandparents, my father's parents. The
And this
two,
is in Poland? Or
yes, this is in Poland. This is in a town called Szczygów. The two men are my father's brothers. One of them I met, the one with the little mustache, was Elle. And my father's father, my grandfather, was Nasano, and my grandmother was Alterische. And Alterische is my name, is my Eleanor Reissa, is a kind of you know, mixed up Alterische. And we learned from this photo, that's a nice house and that's a nice cow. And they were not poor people, my family. They were merchants. Look at that guy on, you know, I mean, that's the tie. And I mean, they're nice looking, well-dressed, sharp men. Okay, let's try the next one. Because, so this photo, a studio shot, right, before the war, and Gudrun, the costume designer, looked at this and she said, look, you can tell from the collar that it's 1921 or something like this, how well made the suit is, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't remember now what she said, but she dated it for me. There's another one that's not on this list, so I don't know. I don't remember if this is the one from 1919 or 1921. My father left Poland in 1919 or 1920 because his older brothers, he was the seventh of 8 children, and the older brothers had already left for Germany to make their way. And my father did the same. He went to Stuttgart to work in the rag trade with Schlüsselburg brothers, his brothers. And here's a tiny PS that I learned. There's so many takeaways from my journey, but going to Germany in 1920 saved my father's life. Yeah. Even though he was in Auschwitz, even though he was on the death march, no one in his family who remained in Poland lived.
right.
So there you have it. Next. Yeah. So this is like you know, my father in America was a sweatshop worker. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. He took the subway from East New York to downtown Brooklyn, worked night shifts. And this is who he was before I met him. This is who he was in the first third of his life. He was in a white tie with gloves, and you can even see the top hat on the desk behind him. And this was his first wife, Hannah. Yeah.
What's so, I mean, you describe your father and being in the rehabilitation center and taking care of him as a completely different person. So, and I just have to say, I was so related to, you know, I'm the father of a Polish refugee also. So
this, you're the son of your son, you mean?
I'm the son, yeah. I'm confused, but this sort of little bit of shame around that, of not being American and being poor and being like this, and to discover that he's this incredibly elegant.
I mean, look at him, Yehuda, look at him. And when when I was taking care of him in the nursing home, I mean, he was wearing chinos and polyester vests with, I mean, I didn't know. Next, please.
Right.
And this was my father's, I guess, 2 children later. This is his wife and him again. Look how dapper he is. And this little girl is Frida, his daughter, who was born in 1934. And there's a son, Harry, who was born in 31. So in 38, at Kristallnacht, Harry had just turned 7, a week before Kristallnacht or after, I can't recall. And it was just after that that he was old enough, and they put him on the Kindertransport and sent him to England, where, as sagen Gesinnten Starek, he is today still age 90. But Frida and her mother, I learn on this trip, were.
So you didn't know about Frida at all before this?
I knew, I did. I didn't learn about her till way later. Nobody. Harry told me about her, and it was like, what? Nobody told me about Frida.
Her father never mentioned.
Never. I mean, he barely told me about Harry, and he had to tell me about Harry. But Frida, he never told me, or about his wife, Hannah. And anyway, I learned on this trip, she and her mother in 1942 were put on a train to Ishbiza, and that is, they perished sometime in 1942. Next, please. And then this is Ulm. This is 1948 or 7, I believe. That's my father. This is now 2 years post Auschwitz, 2 years post Death March. And this is my mother, who is 25 years old, and he is 45. And this was the beginning of their relationship, love affair, joy at that time. And, my whole mission in Ulm was to find this location. I didn't think about getting research or thing. I just wanted to find the place where I could take a photo like this. Anyway, so I think that's it, right, Suzanne?
While we're on that photo, can you just talk a bit about what the letters were actually like, the tone of the letters, what they are, if you like?
The letters vary. The letters vary in tone. First of all, they're only one way, right?
Right.
So my mother kept these letters. Why my mother kept these letters? From her divorced, dead ex-husband, and doesn't tell the daughter of that guy. I don't know. So the letters at first they're all from him to her. She had gotten her papers to her visa in July of 49. He got his not until January 50, right? So he's by himself now for 6 months. And in the beginning, the letters are just, I miss you. I mean, should I read a really quick? I don't know.
I also want to there's a poetic side to your father that you never knew about. Yes. He says to her, I would fly to you if only I had wings. And you didn't know that part of your father.
No, because my father, the guy I knew, was illiterate in English, basically, spoke with an accent. I mean, so no, I didn't know he was poetic. And in one letter, in some of the letters, he's irritated with her.
Right.
And frankly, I thought my sharp tongue always came from my mother, because she also suffered no fools. And if she had something to say, she said it, for better and for worse. But I didn't know him in that way. But in one of his letters, he admonishes her plenty for not writing enough, he says.
uh-huh.
But he says something like, if you're hungry, even a lice in your salad is meat.
Yeah. He was hungry for her.
He was hungry for her. He was lonely. I mean, look, in our business, Yehuda, we try to put ourselves in other people's shoes, in other people's hearts and minds and souls, and that's our job. But 2 years after Auschwitz, 2 years after your first wife and baby daughter, who you love so, are killed, and your parents are killed, and everybody's killed, and you're starved and beaten, and I learn in this journey about my father's experience in the camp, on the way to the camp, after the camp. You know, I always, in those pictures of the guys on of the prisoners in those camps, and they look from their racks where they're laying piled next to each other, on top of each other, starving, and I look always, my whole life, I look, is that my father? Is that my father? Is that? And I see the people with the yellow star, and I think, is that my father? Is that my father? And at a certain point, I think, no, my father's not in that picture, and my father is not in the picture with the yellow star. And I stop thinking that my father wore a yellow star. And I stopped thinking that my father was in that bunk. Which bunk was he in? And I learned in the letters, in fact, in only one letter, of all these 56 letters, the penultimate letter, he says something about Auschwitz. And he says something like, I was in the second of the second level of the bunks, he writes to her. And I think, okay, my father was in the second level of the bunks. And he writes about the star. And it's like, yes, Eleanor, of course, my dear, your father wore a star. Of course he did. I just stopped thinking about it, Yehuda. So I am aware now of what happened to him, because of reparations, he gave testimony that in the archive in Ludwigsburg, I found because Yeva found it, because the guy in Ludwigsburg found it, because Hans Huber found it, because it's there. And I'll say this to people who want to find things, there's stuff there.
I mean, in your book, you go there, and I think it's like you're expecting maybe like this, and you get a stack that takes, and you only have 4 days
I only have 4 days. 4 days. No, I mean, it was crazy. And an interesting thing also, it's like, I know the end of the story, right? I know, first of all, I know the end of those letters.
Right.
Those letters, that love affair, I know ends in divorce. I know, so it's like being on a river of time, and you know what happens at the end, and you want to say, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Since I'm looking at the time, and I still want to hear you read some more. Is there a part that you would like to read?
Well, I'm gonna read. I'm gonna.
There's so much to choose from.
There is so much. I'm gonna go to the end in a way, and then back up. There's something. There's a takeaway. There are many takeaways on this book that I learned more than I dreamed. I
also just want to say to the listeners, the testimony that Eleanor receives about her father's experience is amazing. It's amazing. It's so detailed, and it's an incredible journey in itself. And that's all in the book about what his experience during the war. It's unbelievable.
So here's the takeaway. It's been more than 2 years since I was in Germany. Before I went there, I knew nothing. Now I know a little bit more than nothing, but still not everything. The darkness that has been with me all of my days is clearer now, more defined, based on facts rather than shapeless shadows. The sources of my sorrow are labeled and filed and have a beginning, although not an end. That will die when I die. There is also a reawakened paranoia. My senses are more alert to nationalism and bigotry. The sound of marching boots and the smoke in the distance make me wonder about packing my bags and when and where to flee if the bastards get too close again. What means too close? I'm witnessing history mutate and repeat so soon. I am certain, even though I'm not a scientist and even though I have done little research, that my own rage, of which there is plenty, and my existential fear and consciousness of death, and my sarcasm and greed and empathy, all of these things and more come directly from the womb in which I was born. My genes contain the chromosomes of memory, my parents' memory, inherited trauma. My chromosomes remember the years of starvation, the years of freezing, the years of beatings, the constant flinching, waiting for the next blow, preparing for the pain, the trauma of being whipped on the block, the hiding and the smoking and the clipping of hair and the sleeping on wooden shoes and being secretive and being wily and being scared to death and scared of death. My radar is locked onto the stink of anti-Semitism and racism, as well as the cruel arbitrariness of extermination. A simple turn to the right or left can hasten the end or equal the end. How can you ever be careful enough? That my father felt I was the reincarnation of his first daughter, Frida, saddened and surprised me, and yet I felt that too, that I had been given her life, that all of her bits and pieces had magically, karmically recombined to become me, that the cosmos would not permit her to die forever because her life was stolen. The crime was corrected. I am the correction. I am Frida's justice, Frida's revenge. My life is revenge. There is something else, though, something I've been holding inside for these 2 years, waiting for this moment to say, here and now. I will repeat these words again and again until the very end of my days. My father and the others who lived and died during that time in that place were not survivors. No, I reject that term. Those people did not survive. Cows survive. What those people did, all of them, not just the ones in the ghetto or the forests or the basements or the camps, was fight. They were fighters. Whether they lived or were killed, they fought. With every molecule of their breath and brain and brawn, they fought to live. With all their might and their heart and prayers and selflessness and selfishness and guns and books and pens and bread, they were Holocaust fighters, not survivors. In the cattle cars, up the chimneys, in the attics and tunnels and sewers, they fought for their lives, for our lives, for my life. I am not the child of Holocaust survivors. No, I reject that passive, minimizing, head-bowing term. My father never bowed down his head. He said, well, why should I? Why should we? Words count. I, Eleanor Reissa Schlisselberg, am the daughter of Holocaust fighters, courageous humans who fought the devil like hell for life to the death. Can you imagine if the world had called them Holocaust fighters? To have been the daughter of fighters rather than the daughter of survivors, I would have been Supergirl, for goodness sake. Strong and proud rather than an ashamed hidden light. In its early days, the state of Israel marginalized Yiddish. In fact, there was a time it was forbidden. It was considered a joke language, a language of the victim. It reflected a time of weakness when Jews went like sheep to the slaughter. From today's observatory, that looks like arrogance and gall. Perhaps it was just ignorance or blindness. The tenacity and resourcefulness of the Israeli rests squarely on the unacknowledged shoulders of those people who were hunted, starved, burned, shot, gassed. I spent my life as an embarrassed child of an other, of a man I perceived as a powerless victim with false teeth and a funny accent, who accidentally had some good, horrible luck and lived. Sheep? No way. Tenacious, instinctual, smart, brave, greedy to live. That's where I come from, who I come from, who so many Jews come from. And that's, you know, I think those people were unseen. They were, what they lived through, what they went through, how they proceeded and persevered.
And that's why it's so important that we see them through you, Eleanor. And that's why I'm so, I don't know, just to be here and hear your, I can only imagine your mother and father looking down on you with great.
Well,
Yeah.
I went to this memorial, and there's, maybe we'll kind of close with this little poem.
Yeah.
And it was written in German, but it's been translated. It's by an Austrian Jew, Eric Fried, and it's called in English, in German, it's Gespräch mit einem Überlebender. And forgive me, people who speak German. And in English, it's spoken to a survivor. What did you do then that you should not have done? Nothing. What did you not do that you should have done? This and that and some other things. Why did you not do it? Because I was afraid. Why were you afraid? Because I did not want to die. Did others die because you did not want to die? I believe yes. Do you have something to say about what you did not do? Yes. I ask you, what would you have done in my place? That I do not know, and I cannot judge you. I only know one thing. Tomorrow, none of us will be alive if today we once again do nothing.
Exactly. Thank you, Eleanor. I think I want to turn it over to Suzanne, maybe, because I see people have questions who've been watching and listening.
Thank you, Yehuda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you both so much. Eleanor, that was just fantastic to listen. Not fantastic, but to be able for you to bring the story to everyone. And I will tell everyone that the book, The Letters Project, A Daughter's Journey, is also available on audiobook. Eleanor is the one who is reading it. And so to hear the entirety of the book in her voice is just very special. So I encourage people not just get the book, but follow along with it as you listen to her speak. So the first question comes, we had some people write some things in earlier as well. When this book came out in January, that was before the war in Ukraine. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to the things you were talking about are thinking about what's happening in Ukraine. I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Well, the only thing I can say is it felt resonant before Ukraine. You know, I mean, it felt resonant before, and now watching killing and slaughter and on a certain level, I don't want to get into this because everybody has their own opinion, but I just remember people saying, well, why couldn't we bomb the train stations on the way to Auschwitz? Why couldn't the Allies do more? And here we are watching war on TV and online, and we click emojis and that are embracing, or we send money as we should to Ukrainian relief. But what should they have done in 1939, and what should we do now? That's where I go with that. What is our job?
Mhm. Is there an unintentional and unfair burden placed upon children of Holocaust survivors, or as you say, fighters?
Well, I mean, the burden was placed on our parents, really, uh, and I I wouldn't accept that. If I could save them, I would, but otherwise I wouldn't trade places with anybody in the world. Because I would say about the people who are the children of those Holocaust fighters, they understand life from the bottom and from the top, and, from the ugliest in humanity and the best in humanity. So, I mean, if I had to be somebody's daughter, I'll pick my parents, but I wish I had known, and I wish I was nicer, and I wish, but in my family, they used to say, you wish, you wash. So never mind.
So did was this experience a freeing experience for you?
It was the deepest thing I ever went through in my whole life. And so I guess I live for such moments. I mean, in the theater, we go there. We want to go to the deepest of the deep. And uh, yeah, I went to it. So I'm good, kind of. I mean, I'm still sad and, malcontent sometimes, but a lot less so, I think.
Mhm. And as there are fewer and fewer Holocaust fighters alive, do you feel more of a responsibility for really sharing this story with others?
I do. I do. I'm fairly obsessed, frankly. I mean, it's a little bit, uh, I don't know what to do first. I don't know what school to call, what university to call, what JCC to call, what church to call, what mosque to call. I mean, it just feels like, you know, give me a megaphone and bring that Holocaust denier over here. Let's have a chat. Um, I'm in the mood to yak while I can still yak, and I'm I really I like you don't make any money on books. I just would like to tell people in case you were thinking of writing one. So it's really, and I'm good. It's really not that. It's an important story, and I'm in the mood. I'm in the mood. I'm doing everything I can, and people, readers, and friends, and strangers, are helping me as best they can to to have this book have some breadth and depth.
Someone would like to know, once you found out about your brother in London, did you develop a relationship with him? Was he able to give you more information
Yes.
that helped you along the way?
He's the one that told me about Frida. No, but by the time I found out about Frida, everybody was dead. My parents were dead, and only Harry was living. And Harry told me about the Kinder transport, and told me about Frida, and told me what it was like Kristallnacht during the day on his way to school. And yes, and I mean, he was raised by non-Jewish people who took him in and treated him like a son. And now he's, a British citizen. I mean, he's 90, and he's not a Jewish guy, but I don't care.
So we do have to end, but before we go, what advice do you have to people about how they can begin their journey of learning more about family from the Holocaust?
First of all, if you have anybody who lived through any of it, go talk to them, ask them questions. You want to record them, record. Don't wait. That's A. Do not wait. B, Germany has massive amounts of information. There are these archives, and it's not like it's easy, but it's doable. And the Holocaust Museum in Washington has some stuff, and in Israel has some stuff, and you can find out when people, what ship they took. The New York City has records of people's information and the marriages and stuff like that.
Great. And I will tell you, you and I had a conversation about this months ago. And I think something that really helped me is I too have a lot of letters and don't know what they say. And the thing that you said was start with the date. You said, look at the dates, and that will, even if you don't know what it says, it'll start to help you figure out what direction to go. And I found that very helpful.
Yeah, because also you see, how many days apart were the letters? It tells you a lot of different things. Like in my father's letters, there's some of them are real Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then not for a month. And that, there are things you learn. Yeah, that's great, Suzanne.
So again, I want to thank Eleanor and Yehuda for joining us and for sharing this story with everyone. Again, it's called The Letters Project, A Daughter's Journey. I will be sending out a follow-up email later this week that will include a link to this recording so you can watch it again or share it with others, along with a link to the book to purchase. And Eleanor, somebody asked if you could share, tell us now, and I can put it in the follow-up email, who it was who wrote that moving poem that you read.
Eric Fried, ERICHFRIED.
Great, I will include that. Again, thank you, everybody. Thank you for helping us to commemorate this important day, which begins tomorrow at sunset. And we will see everybody next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.